Hi, my name is Robert Ridley, and today we are going to be talking about tort law. What is tort law? Tort is defined as an act or omission that gives rise to injury or harm to another and amounts to a civil wrong for which one can be liable. There are two different types of tort law, intentional and unintentional. Intentional is an act committed with intent to do harm to another or understands the act could result in harm. Unintentional tort is an unintended accident that led to injury. The first case that we're going to look at in dealing with tort law is Frame versus Comax. During this case, it was an 8th grade student that had been redirected during class as the spelling test was being given orally. The teacher then asked the student to leave the room, and the student finally responded once the teacher walked over to the desk. Once the teacher walked to the desk, the student slowly stood, and the teacher then grabbed the student by the arm and escorted him out of the room. The combined actions threw the student off balance, causing him to stumble backwards down the aisle where he hit the podium and eventually came to a halt against the blackboard. The ruling in this case, the court found that although Comax committed a battery, he was justified in doing so. Frame's actions were apparently sufficient to provoke the teacher to forcefully remove the student from the classroom. Moreover, the court found it was necessary for Comax to remove the student not only to maintain order, but also to facilitate the learning process. The reactive, proactive, and professional ethics of this case. In the reactive measures in regards to my building, we would address this with all of our faculty and staff, that a situation that could require physical contact and how they should go through with their policies and procedures that we have in place. We also are fortunate enough to have an SRO officer in our building, and our teachers have the option to call down to the office to request for myself and our SRO to come to the classroom to remove a student that is refusing to leave. Some proactive measures that we could do as a school, obviously, we should review our policies and procedures every year at the beginning of the year to go over all of our expectations for when these situations arrive. Ethics, our teachers have the ability to make the best judgment call in order to maintain the environment conducive to learning. So if a student is refusing to leave the room, that teacher could forcefully remove the student, but best judgment call could also be to call down to the front office and request for myself as the dean of students or our SRO officer to assist the teacher in removing the student from the classroom. The next court case that we will look at is Flanagan versus Canton. During this case, it dealt with a middle school student at Canton Middle School. Flanagan was participating in gym class, and on that day, the teacher had noticed that the class was kind of getting a little rowdy and out of control. The teacher actually ended the class a little bit early in order to go over proper behavior expectations for that class and during activities. Upon dismissal to go change, the teacher stayed behind to answer a question from another student. During that 3 to 4 minute conversation with the other student, the incident occurred in the boys' dressing room where a student had been pushed from behind, causing him to sustain some severe personal injury. The court did recognize that although a school has a duty to adequately supervise its students, it is not an insurer of those students' safety. Court also pointed out that the school is only liable for foreseeable injuries sustained by a student that were caused by inadequate supervision. The court ultimately then decided to side with the student and reasoned that because the students were misbehaving the day of the incident, the teacher owed a greater duty to supervise the students in the locker room, especially because their conduct was foreseeable. The reactive measures to this case, if this would have occurred, in our building, it would have we have similar expectations of supervision throughout our gym class. They would have been stopped early or should have been stopped early and an explanation given on the proper behavior that is expected. Upon dismissal to change, our teacher is also expected to supervise our students as they are getting changed in the locker room to ensure that no fights break out or no inappropriate behavior happens during changing. Proactive measures would be, we need to review our policies and procedures and expectations for supervision at the start of each school year with our faculty and staff. That way, everyone has a clear understanding of what is expected of them in their supervision role outside of the classroom as well. Ethics, I believe that we should have a training at the start of the year, especially for our new teachers, that kind of helps explain tort liability in this case, but also just different scenarios and consequences that could come from those particular cases. The next the next case that we will look at deals with Nichols versus USD number 400. This student was participating in football and was at a night practice with his high school football team. Upon conclusion of practice, the head coach directed the players to run off of the field to the locker room. Between the practice field and the locker room, there was a waterway which provided drainage from the high school playground. As the player ran to the locker room, he passed through the waterway and stumbled forward. Although he did catch his balance and continued on to the locker room, once he had sat down, he felt pain in his back. The student then brought the suit against the Unified School District, alleging that the coach was negligent in requiring players to run to the locker room in the dark, failing to properly supervise those players. The district court granted summary judgment in favor of the school district based upon the discretionary function and recreational use exceptions to the Kansas Tort Claims Act, KSA 75-6104, and the Land and Water Recreational Areas Act, KSA 58-3201. Some reactive measures in this case, we kind of would do the same as the previous coach. We know we always ask our kids to jog off the field and to the locker room. Some proactive measures, obviously in this particular situation, as we require our athletes to do the same and jog off the field into the locker room. However, as the coach, we should at the beginning of each season make sure that all of our players understand that there is a waterway or whatever obstruction may be in the way, and teach them the proper way to cross, or that they should use extreme caution when in that area. Ethics, our school athletic director could actually include in his yearly coaches meeting under the safety section, that talking about it's the coach's responsibility to make sure that he or she is informing their players of any areas that they should use caution around. The next court case that we will look at is Mosley versus Portland School District number 1J. In this personal injury case, the student brought action against the school district for injuries sustained in a fight on school grounds during a lunch period. The student claimed that the school was negligent in 4 different areas. Number 1, failing to exercise proper supervision of students. Number 2, failing to provide proper security and sufficient security personnel for protection of students when the defendant knew that students carried weapons into the school. Number 3, failing to prevent weapons from being carried into the school building. And number 4, failing to stop the attack before the knife was used. The court ruled in favor of the school district that it had not been negligent in any respect claimed by the student. Some reactive measures. In this situation, we always have multiple supervisors during our lunch periods. We always have at least one teacher, a counselor, and an administrator, as well as our SRO officer present during lunch periods. If an incident breaks out, we allow our SRO officer to break up the incident, and then we follow procedure in regards to the infraction. Some proactive measures, just continuing to analyze and evaluate our policies and procedures, and to continue to educate our faculty and staff on an annual basis about the expectations of supervision and their policies and procedures in particular areas of our school. Ethic-wise, our faculty and staff must be able to make the best decision in the moment that will keep all of our students and faculty safe. The next court case that we will look at is Johnson Johnson versus the School District of Millard. In this case, a first grade student was injured in his music class. On the day the student was injured, the teacher had taught them a song, London Bridge, and a game that goes along with it. The students were given instruction on how to properly play the game and sing the song. The student then testified that he was swung fast and hard while caught in his classmates' arms during the game. He also testified that the teacher had their back turned and was writing on the whiteboard during the incident. The student that was injured had to have stitches and suffered from blurred vision for short periods of time and continues to suffer from headaches. The trial court found that the teacher was negligent in supervision. The school district appealed from the judgment. Some reactive measures in this situation: our teachers are expected to give specific instructions as to the game being played. Our teachers would also be expected to supervise the students the entire time the game was taking place. Some proactive measures: just continuing to train our faculty and staff about proper behavior in the classroom and outside the classroom, and be sure that the teachers are very clear and precise when they're giving their instruction. Ethics: our teachers must be aware of possible liability when determining what games should or should not be played in the classroom. That was the last court case that we will look at today. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to working with you all in the future.